Welcome everyone to the Racist War and Everything. This is a show where we discuss Australian politics, and believe it or not, there has actually been some reporting in the world of Australian politics in the last week that doesn't have something to do with the CFMEU or the American election. So, yeah, hate to disappoint if that's what you're tuning in for, but Nolsey, you're here. How are you going?
Oh, good. Nice, decent amount of rain, still a decent temp. Everything's more or less going fine. I haven't thought about killing myself in a week.
Okay, that's good. Maybe that's a new record. So, yeah, while we're not going to talk about Biden stepping down or people dodging bullets or anything, we are definitely going to discuss the CFMEU, the Construction, Forestry, Mining, Energy Union, which is, safe to say, Australia's most militant union. They really only ever competed with the Maritime Union for that prize, and now they're just one big union anyway. So it looks like what is happening now is kind of what the Liberal Party were pushing for so many years. And that is for Labor to stop accepting donations, stop accepting affiliation, and stop accepting the role of CFMEU leaders as factional warlords or kingmakers, or whatever you want to call it. Because at the least, they have been suspended at the national level from the Labor Party, and they're not receiving any more donations. We're going to go through each state one by one, but we have seen, similar reactions in the various states.
Yeah, it's been pretty fucking universal.
It has. Look, as far as I know, nothing has happened here in WA because there were no allegations made against the WA branch, not that I'm aware of anyway. I read a statement put out by CFMEU WA, and that's what they said anyway, that no allegations have been made. They weren't featured on the 60 Minutes episode that I'm sure many of us watched. But yeah, I got to say, though, that even though this is what the Liberals have been pushing for so long, this disaffiliation with the CFMEU, I don't know if the Liberals really wanted that, actually, because it seemed like the CFMEU were always just a good sort of bat to smack Labor with every now and then. And if they completely disassociate themselves from them and don't take any more of their money, well, it makes it a lot harder for the Libs to say that Labor are beholden to militant trade unions. So
yes,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the unfortunately that'll no longer be a set of brushes that they can tar and feather them with.
Yeah. So the old saying, "Be careful what you wish for; you might actually get it." This could be something that backfires on them. Okay. Anyway, let's go through the various stories. And by the way, this should be a shorter episode for you guys because, honestly, CFMEU and the American election has just been absolutely dominating the headlines here, and people seem to have forgotten to report on anything else. Anyway, so look, there were a number of allegations that have been published in all the newspapers that are owned by Channel 9, I guess. I just watched the episode of 60 Minutes where most of the most damning claims were made. And I remember it was actually much like what I predicted last week. I said it was more or less going to be a case of like bikie gang members or organized crime gang members simply being given jobs, like having favors done for them by the CFMEU. And that is actually pretty much all it was. As far as I could see. I mean, I remember there was one guy who was an ex-member of the Mongols, and then he went on to start a building company. Like he was just a small contractor, and he ended up getting a contract on one of what they call the big builds, meaning like usually a big government project. And I just kind of thought, like, I don't really see what the problem is there. Okay, this guy had a history with an outlaw motorcycle gang. But it was interesting, they never said that he had a criminal record. So,
Yeah.
okay, this guy may have had some dodgy associations or whatever, but he was also an ex-member, okay? He basically had left that life behind, and he was focusing on his career in construction. And I don't know, I just kind of thought I don't really get what the big deal is there. And then similarly, other like union delegates that are appointed on site, like health and safety reps and that, some of them were also found to be either members of bikie gangs or ex-members of bikie gangs.
Well, for example, when I was dealing with construction, one of the companies that we would run into from time to time was quite literally employing ex-bikie members. Basically, there was like a job furlough thing for like, oh, if your crime is not massively serious and etc., you can get like released from jail with like an monitor to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a handful of guys that were just like straight up like fucking shot callers for the bikies, quote unquote working, really just sitting on their ass and day drinking at this construction job.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I think examples like that, that is when, the CFMEU is abusing its power. You do hear a lot about how, because I remember this happened all the time when they were building the train link, the Mandurah line, all the way, obviously, down, from Perth to Mandurah. There was always reports of, like, guys just getting paid to do nothing. Like, they would knock off, like, 2 hours early from work and still get paid for the full day and stuff like that. That stuff, I think, is, that's where the real criticism actually lies. But, just to talk about that statement I read from WA, I'll see if I can bring it up. But basically what they said in there was no allegations, but also, so it says this. Having said that, we support those who may have made a mistake in life, but have since proven they are on the right track. We believe in second chances. This is the nature of our union and our industry, but we will never be taken for granted. So that seemed to be them kind of saying, okay, yeah, we do have guys, he might have been patched members. We do have guys who might have a criminal record or been to jail or whatever. But we don't believe that means they should never be able to have a job ever again. And sometimes when these guys can't find work anywhere else, we will help them get work. And I don't see anything wrong with that. What's the alternative? If you're talking about guys who previously made their money from robbing people or selling drugs or whatever it might be, and then you deny them the opportunity to actually get a legitimate job and earn honest money, well, you don't leave them with much other choice than to go back to how they earned their money before, which is by illegal means. So, they run programs in jail all the time, like for the guys who are about to get out, to make sure that they've got something that they can go to later, that is work, so they don't end up back in the can again. So if the CFMU is offering that to them, I just say, what's the problem? I don't really get it. Okay, so we would have also heard that on Friday, John Setka resigned. Apparently on Wednesday or Thursday, he was issued a number of questions by Channel 9, and he refused to answer any of them. He then was made aware that there was going to be an expose, a full episode, by the way. If you haven't seen it yet, it's like a full 60 minutes. But if you watch it online, it's only like 45. The entire episode is on the CFMEU, which is very rare for 60 minutes to do. They've usually, run a few stories.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's why Setka resigned on the Friday. He was actually due to resign anyway. I think it was in September.
I still think it's hilarious that literally only so many years ago, Setka nearly resigned in a completely different way.
Yeah, he did when the members turned on him. Look, like with a lot of things with like with COVID, it just like doesn't matter anymore. Like, once restrictions went away and vax
Oh
mandates
yeah.
and all that, I don't know. People just sort of went back to business as usual. That's
Although like a
actually one
bit
of the
more
stories.
mentally disturbed, but yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that anger that was there within the union in Victoria, kind of dissipated fairly soon after all of that. But yeah, well, ultimately, what brought Setka down were these continued allegations of criminal infiltration of the Victorian branch of the CFMEU. So, um, yeah, that just caused Sitka to bring his resignation forward. I don't know if that, I don't know what they're going to do now because, like, the other guys in line for the job, like, the deputy's name is Derek Christopher, and he is said to be even more militant than John Setka. So I don't know if that's really going to
Well,
make a difference.
yeah, I was wondering, like, would they pull what they did in what was it, like the mid '90s, where like, oh yeah, we basically got found out for doing a bit of corruption and having like criminals in our union and criminals as our members. Stay quiet for a bit, maybe lose some like actual like power and rights to the what was it the business commission or some shit like that. Um, and then basically come back and then lobby to get those powers back. I thought that was just the rinse cycle for the CMFEU at this point.
Well, the predecessor was the BLF, the Builders
Mm,
Labourers Federation, and that was deregistered actually by the Hawke government in the 80s.
yeah.
And then, yeah, they basically reformed as the CFMEU after that. So I mean, look, even, the government will not, to go on that note, the government will not deregister them. So the IR minister is Tony Burke, and he already has said, no, we're not doing that. Initially, he wouldn't be drawn on it. But now that they have appointed, what they call an administrator, that basically means that the union is run by government officials from the outside. And it's their job to sort of clean the act up externally. And what Tony Burke said was, well, look, if you deregister a union, you can't actually run an administrator. You can't regulate them. You can't have external government regulation applied to them. So certainly while they're in administration, there is no plans to deregister. Um, so, all right, let's go through like the different states here. Obviously, we're going to start in Victoria, where most of the allegations were made. So, uh, Jacinta Allen, the Premier, has started the process of suspending the state's construction union. So they keep going on about the construction division. So I'm not sure in this case, but I think it's just the construction division. They don't have a problem with, like, say, the manufacturing division. There's, they're often held up to be like the honest part of the CFMEU.
Well,
But anyway,
manufacturing, just because of the nature of manufacturing, it's harder to like slip money in, and generally the jobs can be kind of shit.
maybe it's because there's also too many women in it.
Yeah,
Might
that's
be
it.
that. Um, but yeah, so look, what that means is uh, the Victorian Labor Party will not accept donations from the construction division. And Jacinta Allen has also said that there's going to be tougher anti-bikie laws passed in Parliament next month. So, look,
What the fuck are they gonna do? There's already like fucking like criminal association, and basically like it's the only group that companies are allowed to like actively discriminate against.
right. So, I mean, what are they like? What are they planning to do here? Like, actually pass a law that says it is illegal for a bikie to get a job or something? Is that what they're going to do? Because that would
Look, you're
just,
worried
do exactly.
about them being outlawed, and you put it outside of the law. You're literally excluding them from the one protections of the law.
Yeah, it's a retarded thing to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So we're going to push them further into the criminal realm. I mean, some bikie members, they actually do just treat it as a club, as like a brotherhood or whatever. and that's why
Brotherhood
they
of
do it.
Queer.
I'm not saying they're not involved in criminal activity. They obviously are, but not every member is. Not every single member. And
Yeah, I'm starting up my new motorcycle club, my new MC, Sons of Billy Harrington.
that show was awful, man. That Sons of Anarchy was just the idea that in any way resembled what a bikie gang is actually like was just a joke. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, looking forward to this. What's it going to be like? I mean, I know that in Queensland they have very tough anti-bikie laws, and I don't think that's really kind of stemmed any of the problems that they've historically had with them. They just kind of conduct all their meetings in secret now. So yeah, I don't see this turning out very well. Okay. All right. So in Queensland, they won't be accepting donations or meet with members of the CFMEU until the investigations are over in the southern branches. By that, they just mean Victoria and New South Wales. I should point out that it's really only Victoria and New South Wales where I saw allegations being made anyway. That said, the South Australian chapter of the CFMEU is controlled by Victoria. So administrators going in to take over the Victorian division automatically mean the South Australian division as well. So apparently, though, the CFMEU has not donated to the Labor Party for some time at the federal level. They have in Queensland. It was around $73,000. Now, that's not very much, although it was pointed out that that is about the average amount of money you spend on a campaign at the state level in a marginal seat. And, with Labor tipped to lose the election that I think is in October, yeah, that could basically mean another seat taken away from them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What I also found interesting here when I was reading this story about Queensland is that the Labor Party weren't the only party that the CFMEU donated to. They also donated $20,000 to the Qatar Australian Party. So, and
why?
It's not. Yeah, well, that's the weird thing. The Qatar Australia Party, if you look at them, they're probably like more left wing than what you might think, what a lot of people imagine them to be.
That one quote from Bob Catter is like, "Let 1,000 flowers blossom," but by God, the fucking crocodiles are killing people. That was so
he also said
horrendous.
like there were no homosexuals in Kennedy in his electorate. I like that one. But yeah, when you look at the kind of like the Qatar Australian Party's economic policies, they're against free trade. They want tariffs brought back in, subsidies back for manufacturing, and they're all for workers' rights and even union rights. And I guess the CFMEU considered them to be like the second best in Queensland, even ahead of the Greens. I didn't find anything about them donating any money to the Greens, even though they're pretty much the only party who voted against those demerger laws that passed the Senate recently, which gives the manufacturing division the opportunity to split away from the CFMEU. Okay, so what else have we got? Okay, so New South Wales. So Chris Minns has also taken the steps to suspend the construction division of the CFMEU. They're under investigation, and in regards to donations, he said that while the investigations are going on, they won't take any more donations. He has not said if they're going to just stop donations entirely, though. And this is what the Liberal Party keep attacking these various premiers on, is their kind of lack of commitment. Not in every case, but sometimes, they won't be drawn on exactly what the future holds. Okay, so...
Well, at this point, would it be any advantage for them to detail that out?
I don't think if we're talking about this as like something that could uh, win or lose votes for Labor, I don't know if it's such a big deal. I really don't. Um, I do find. Look, let's remember this. Like, who was the recent chair of Channel 9? It was Peter Costello, right? Of course, he had to step down after he, like, knocked that journalist over. But Peter Costello always had an axe to grind with the unions. I mean, obviously, he was a Liberal treasurer. But before he entered Parliament, he co-founded the H.R. Nichols Society. And the H.R. Nichols Society, like, are basically a one-issue think tank or lobby. And that issue is
Yep.
industrial relations. They don't focus on anything else. They don't talk about flat taxes or anything. They talk completely about industrial relations and what that means for the rights of unions and so forth. In other words, they basically just wanted to take all workplace rights away from unions, the right to strike and so forth. So you just always find that the CFMEU is the favorite punching bag of people who are anti-union. I mean, remember the Royal Commission into the building industry started under John Howard, which was like, I don't know, 1999 or so. That was just an investigation into the CFMEU. What about the Royal Commission that was just simply into unions by Tony Abbott? Again, that was into the CFMEU. They just relentlessly go after the CFMEU and wage this battle to have them deregistered or at least have their power diminished. And pretty much every time they fail at that. That statement I read before from the WA branch, they actually said that their membership has gone up. They have been inundated with calls from people who now want to sign up. So,
Right.
would this actually hurt Labor, like going into another election? The Liberal Party might want to run their attack ads and associate the CFMEU with Labor. But I don't know if historically that's ever really worked for them. I think it's just a non-issue really. People might find it interesting and might look on it and say, "Oh, I don't like some of that behavior. It's just bullying, whatever." But does that mean, that they'll, find Labor guilty by association and therefore say, "Oh no, I'm not voting Labor now"? I don't think so. Okay.
Also, the people who vote Labor don't actually really give a shit about this. And yeah, and two, like, fucking Jesus Christ, the CMFU, it's like fucking calling like a water wet when you fucking find out that there's like fucking organized crime in there.
Yeah, well, like there was nothing new, really. They were just kind of new figures to point out, from various underworld figures. There was some guy in it who actually called himself Sammy the Turk, or at least that's what they were calling him. And I was like, isn't that the guy that Chopper Reed shot outside Bojangles? That guy was called Sammy the Turk. Now we got another one.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing was that, like, sometimes if you simply wanted access to a site, you'd have to pay bribe money. Like, the union basically controlled the labour hire there. The builders themselves had little say over who got to work there. The CFMEU would appoint them themselves. And to do that, you have to be connected to them somehow. Again, like, yeah, that's nothing new. The CFMEU has been doing that for decades. So, okay, now the ACTU, the Australian Council of Trade Unions, they have officially suspended the CFMEU from their organisation. It was funny when Sally McManus, who is the head of the ACTU, when she did her speech, there was like this big fat lesbian looking creature standing behind her with a t-shirt that said feminist unionist. Did you see that one?
No, I did not.
You didn't? Yeah, and I thought, okay, that kind of tells you all you need to know.
What the fuck is going on here?
The fact that, other unions, not the CFMEU, but other unions, get so worked up about gay rights and women's rights and equal protection in the workforce and all that kind of shite, they don't seem to realize that they're falling victim to doing exactly what neoliberalism wants them to do, and that is
Yep.
focus on social justice issues so that it serves as a distraction to actually fighting for better wages and conditions for your members. After all, I think that's why your members pay a membership fee. But they've forgotten that. And that's why when you look at the unions like the public sector union, for example, who really focus on that stuff, I think their last pay rise for their members was like 3%. Okay? When you watch the 60 Minutes episode, it was pointed out that one of the EBAs that the CFMEU signed on a big build site had a 20% wage increase. All right. So it's kind of obvious which union is getting the results. Okay. The CFMEU doesn't focus on all of that LGBT crap, and they actually get their members decent wage rises and better conditions. And I'd say that Sally McManus and all those lesbian land whales standing behind her could actually learn something from the CFMEU in that regard. Anyway, here's where I think Sally McManus was dishonest. I watched her interview on an episode of 730, and she basically said over and over again that she was not aware of any of these allegations. She simply said that she had heard rumors, some of which had been posted on Facebook. And that was it. She said that was the extent of her knowledge, was just seeing some rumors posted on Facebook. Now, as we said before, all of this stuff is nothing new. CFMEU have been doing stuff like this for decades. I just can't fathom how the head of the ACTU could have been completely ignorant of it. I just don't see it. And I'm certainly not the only person who's saying that. So anyway, they said that, look, they are open to letting them back in, but, they have to clean up their act, which I guess is what the various administrators are tasked to do. I would say, though, that the CFMEU would pretty much just return to business as usual, as they say, which is actually one of their slogans. They put that on stickers.
Yeah. Some of those stickers can be fun, actually. I don't. Why exactly do they fucking hold on to the Eureka flag one so much?
I don't know. That's always been sort of the official logo of the CFMEU. I mean, just everyone sort of debates the Eureka flag and who owns it, quote unquote. But yeah, the CFMEU are probably the most prolific users of it, I would say. And what was funny was under Malcolm Turnbull, he made it illegal to fly one of those on a building site. You remember that?
Yeah, and I remember every single crane had literally on the rear counterweight connector, just having a gigantic fucking Eureka flag after that. It's like, yeah, come and make me take this down. It's literally a fucking safety violation to do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I mean, that just shows the anti-union fixation that the Liberal Party has often had. The National Party don't give a shit. It's just the Liberal Party. They have this fixation on wanting to destroy the union movement. Okay, so the federal level. So as I said, Tony Burke, even though he was open to the idea of deep registration, he's not anymore. He simply has appointed an independent administrator. I'm not sure if we know who that is yet, but we are told it's going to be someone completely unbiased. I don't know about the chances of that, but yeah,
slim to none, Cotton.
It won't independent rule for the CFMEU will not be returned, we're told, until things are cleaned up. Now, the union has actually taken its own action here. So last I read, Zachary Smith, who is the national executive or national secretary, I forget what they call him, he's the the federal leader of the CFMEU. He actually stepped in and he sacked 5 union delegates in the Victorian branch because they were affiliated with Bikies. So I don't know. I was like, look, I would support you sacking them if you could actually show that that was a legitimate conflict of interest or that they were using that role to engage in criminal activity. But all it is actually just guilt by association. Oh, you're a member of a biker club? Well, that's it. You're not allowed to have a job. So what are these 5 guys going to do now? They might return to a life of crime.
They work at Bunnings.
God.
Yeah, they'll go back to crime, man. If they can't make a reasonable amount of money, yeah, they'll go back to crime.
Yep. So the Labor Party's national executive, this is the administrative branch of federal Labor, they voted unanimously to disaffiliate and to no longer accept donations from the CFMEU. Again, that is subject to change, subject to if they actually do get cleaned up adequately enough, and they might have an affiliation with them in the future. But not right now. It's not much. And by the way, in terms of donations of the CFMEU to the national Labor, to federal Labor, I've never seen a figure of over $1 million. So,
yeah.
I mean, in the scheme of it, they're not actually like a massive donor to the Labor Party, and they never have been, actually. I mean, that certainly doesn't compare to the millions of dollars that are poured in to both major parties from corporations each year, for example. The unions are actually pretty small fry compared to them. So, So the CFMEU in Queensland and New South Wales, they put out a statement. So what is this one? So the New South Wales division said that their union was under unprecedented attack, telling members government, state and federal, the big end of town and the ACTU, want you to work for less in unsafe conditions. Then went on to say that Albanese had soiled himself over unsubstantiated allegations. And yet it's worth pointing out here that a lot of it were simply allegations made. All right. I'll tell you actually what I thought was the most egregious example of that on the show. What you would call underhanded journalism. There was some young guy, he was 18, and they called him Indigenous, even though he didn't look Indigenous at all. He went to work on some construction site, and then he found that the company that he was working for lost its contract because of something to do with the CFMEU. I forget what it was. But anyway, he still had a job. He was still allowed to work on the same project. And one day he turned up to work wearing a high-vis vest from the old company. So the company that was given the boot by the union. They were considered to be an anti-union company. And, he didn't, being a young guy and everything, he didn't realize, he didn't understand the politics of the construction game and everything. And, he just wore it just because it was a high-vis vest. And apparently the union officials got really pissed off at him and locked him inside a container for several hours as a way to punish him. The kid came home. He came home that night and then said that he swallowed a bunch of prescription medicine and died in his sleep overnight.
Jesus fucking Christ.
So what they're implying is he was forced into suicide by the CFMEU. Now, I don't know what happened on that site, and there's no corroboration whatsoever that anyone locked him in a container or something. I can imagine maybe he copped a bit of abuse, and maybe one of the older guys said, "Hey, mate, just best you take that off, put another one on." I can't imagine him locking him in a fucking container over something that small, especially like a young guy who obviously didn't understand either. But the mother said,
Yeah,
"No,
no,
I
it's,
would see FMEU."
yeah, I was gonna say that's a bit fucking wacky.
Yeah, and I have trouble believing it. I really do.
Is the mother just fishing for a payout here? And because like it's weird that like you have a story like this and it needs to be included that he was like some whatever percent indigenous as well. It just seems like they're building a case for something in my mind.
Oh, look, I don't know. Like another thing they pointed out was on government projects in Victoria anyway, they're supposed to hire a certain amount of Indigenous employers, and that includes contractors. And they said that one of the contractors that call themselves Indigenous was being infiltrated by people of non-Indigenous background, right? And I'm like, okay, what, you think the CFMEU are the first ones to do that? You ever heard of Bruce Pascoe, for God's sake?
Mm.
Oh, and that one, they actually tied to Mick Gatto. You know Mick Gatto?
No.
Didn't you watch Underbelly, Nosey?
Oh, the fucking
You know the
God,
the whole Melbourne gangland scene with Carl
yeah.
Williams and the Moran brothers and all of that. He was part of the Carlton crew, and he was the one who shot Benji Veneman, who was Carl Williams' bodyguard, basically. No one knows what really happened, so they reckon there was like a struggle over a gun. This is what he said. Like they were like Benji Veneman was trying to shoot him, and they were struggling, like grappling with a gun, and then eventually Gatto managed to fire it on him, but he was found not guilty on self-defense eventually. But he was said to be one of the ones basically controlling one of those Indigenous labour hire companies. And they pointed out this is a guy of Italian background, not Indigenous at all. So, but yeah, what? The union, the CFMEU, they're the first ones to exploit a so-called Indigenous company? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the fucking Indigenous are exploiting Indigenous companies.
I reckon.
Oh, God.
Oh, wait, sorry. In Victoria, we do know who the independent administrator is. So it's former Department of Justice Secretary and Acting Commissioner of the Victorian Public Sector Commission, Greg Wilson. So, yeah, he's obviously some top-level bureaucrat. So he's tasked with cleaning up the union. Okay, now the other kind of attack pieces that we've had here on the CFMEU, I'll go through one, and this one was actually published in the ABC. So I'll read you the headline. Has the CFMEU made home building more expensive? Yes, but not how you think. And this was something that just kept coming up in like Nine's reporting on this. Was like in the middle of a housing crisis, we've got these bloody militant unions pushing up your housing costs and your rent. And now this is when it really gives me the shits, because like they're just finding every excuse they can to blame higher house prices and rent prices on anyone but immigrants. Oh, it's to do with the allocation of land and green tape and not being allowed to build more apartments and subdivide and stuff like that. No, fuck all of that. It's because we're letting too many fucking Indians in. That's why. But anyway,
literally
I don't know.
one every single minute. One admitted as like basically a PR every single fucking minute.
Yeah. Now, yeah, look, I mean, Nolsey, you probably know more about this than me in regards to, construction costs and everything like that. But my understanding is that, like, what you've got at the moment is record high cost of materials, like not of labor, but of materials. And that has actually been what has been sending so many of these building companies bust in many cases. which is what's actually, contributing. If you want to look purely at it from an economic point of view, what's going on in the construction industry, rather than looking at immigration, I think that is the main problem.
Well, yeah, pretty much that's it. Like, I was talking before, or I told you before, like, there was this one materials supplier or materials wholesale here that had literally tens of millions of dollars in unpaid invoices.
Right.
What do you think happens eventually?
Yeah, and that's why you get, like, half-built houses and stuff. A lot of the time, um, when they're building them, they're going into massive amounts of debt, and then it gets to the stage where they can no longer pay it, and they just abandon the site. And then, unfortunately, that means a lot of defects are left in the house as well. Shit like that that's happening.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, again, like basically, like I'm going through an inspection right now, and I was talking to one of the inspectors, and he said a lot of these new built homes, like he's just seeing materials that are being used completely incorrectly, and parts of the building that have been signed off by the builder as done that are just literally incomplete.
Right. So I'll read what this is. A guy called the Builders Collective of Australia. I've never heard of this group, but it must be very similar to the Master Builders Association. So this guy, Phil Dwyer, was asked by the ABC, has the CFMEU put up housing prices? He said, yes, it certainly has driven up costs. Ultimately, anything that occurs that costs money in our sector is passed on to the client. We have always said that up to 30% increases occur on construction sites because of the activities of the CFMEU. We have been ridiculed in the past for that figure, but nevertheless, it just reinforces, I think, the impact this has on the industry and on the community at large. Really, 30%?
I think a little bit more than that, buddy.
You reckon it'll be even more?
Well, again, like it's actually I thought it was going to get better recently because, but it actually kind of is getting worse because, like how to make getting materials cheaper.
No.
Larger order sizes.
Buying in bulk, yeah.
Yeah, buying in bulk, quite literally. And the fact that we've actually managed to decimate and kill off a whole bunch of other construction companies, limiting the physical amount of construction that's happening in this country. Well, we've actually just fucked ourselves and put ourselves on a spiral where this is only going to get worse and worse and worse until there's, like, I don't know, something meaningful done about it. Are you holding your breath? I'm not.
Okay. Okay, now, what about in terms of Labor Party factions? It might surprise you to know that the CFMEU is actually affiliated with the right faction of Labor. Always has been, as far as I know. In fact, unions generally tend to be associated with the right faction. Even the peak body, the ACTU, they're affiliated with the right faction. And, they're the ones who put Hawkey in as leader, and even Simon Crean, who died not long ago. So the Australian is reporting that with the CFMEU out of the picture, or at least sidelined for the time being, this actually gives the Socialist Left faction more dominance in the party room.
Oh, God.
Right, because look, historically, it's always been the right faction. And one of the reasons for that is Labor likes to put out the idea that, they're not putting radical socialists into the leadership. Labor very often, just kind of tout themselves as being sensible centrists. And so they don't like taking people from the left faction. So Albanese being a member of the left factions, that's actually kind of rare. And, that's one of the reasons why the caucus backed Bill Shorten twice in a row. They only really went to Albanese because they didn't have anyone else left. So anyway, with the CFMEU sidelined, they reckon that gives the Socialist Left faction 55% or more of the party conference floor vote. Now, even in Victoria, they reckon that John Setka's control of the the state party room is actually about 11%. So you can see that is much more significant in Victoria. Now, in Victoria, that simply just solidifies the left's grip on power even more, because they were already the dominant faction. Here in WA, I believe they're the dominant faction as well. So you're talking about 11 percentage points essentially taken away from the right faction and handed over to the left, or however that's going to turn out. So that means that Albo would be more secure in his leadership, and Jacinta Allen would be more secure in her leadership as well. And that might mean in the future that would push Labor's policy platform to the left. But when I say to the left, you wouldn't be talking about in terms of economics, and certainly not in terms of industrial relations. In fact, the national leader, Zachary Smith, said that he wanted to make it his duty to push federal Labor further to the left on economics, even though the CFMEU is affiliated to the right faction. Ideology here doesn't really come into it. It's just what union you're affiliated with. Now, if we are going to talk about ideology and how it affects...
The miscellaneous union's still the gay one, right?
The missos, yeah, they are. Look, most of them are, man. Like, bar the CFMEU and like the electrical trades union, I guess, maybe the plumbers union. All the rest are, soft cocks, or at least
sodomy enjoyers.
It's what the CFMEU would, they would call them, soft cocks. They're no fan of Sally McManus, and they're certainly not a fan of like the Australian Workers Union, the AWU. You know what they call it? They call it Australia's worst union. So, but anyway,
burn.
Talking about that woman I saw with that T-shirt standing behind Sally McManus with a T-shirt that said "Feminist Unionist," you're basically going to see more of those types ascend to the top, and you're going to see not just the union movement, but the Labor Party emphasizing social justice issues more and more and more, that they forget their actual roots. And their roots were in the Australian trade union movement, fighting for better wages and conditions for workers. That was how the Labor Party started. And they seem to really be forgetting about that. So, as if we didn't need Labor to be pushed even further in that direction, that is actually what we're going to get now that they have sidelined the CFMEU. They were like actually one of the few forces that was reminding them, hey, you're actually here to represent workers,
You're not here to represent bottoms.
No. Okay, now, there's only one other story we have on industrial relations that is not related to the CFMEU, although it still sort of is. And that is, we're forgetting that actually before the end of the year, Labor are due to introduce their industrial relations reforms. If you need reminding about that, that included things like the right to disconnect, meaning that, like, if your employer contacts you outside of work hours, you have a right to ignore them. So anyway, the Council of Small Business Organizations, they conducted a survey that found that 64% of employers were not aware of what was required of them under the right to disconnect laws, and 75% were not informed about changes concerning employee-like workers. That means people who are,
on paper contractors, but Jesus fucking Christ.
They're the rugged individualists on individual contracts, and because they're entrepreneurs, aren't they? No, so this is people who drive Ubers and do Uber Eats and that kind of shit. They're actually due to be given statutory rights as employees, rather than just be treated as independent contractors. So yeah, these groups are kind of worried that some of these small businesses will fall afoul of the law when they don't even realize they're doing so. Okay, well, read up on the fucking laws then before they're introduced. That's what
I mean, that's your fucking legal responsibility now, isn't it?
It is. And ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So, I mean, look, that said, I hope that the government makes sure that they make it very clear, like, spells it out on a website in black and white exactly what the changes are and what employer obligations are. But they always do that. So I don't really see what the issue is. Okay, so moving away from industrial relations. So, Nolsey, do you think that CrowdStrike and the update that went bad on Friday afternoon, do you think this might have something to do with the Pajeet element? Do you think Indians may have had something to do with this?
Well, you know what? Like maybe not. Like I know the fucking head of the company or the fucking was it the CFO and the CEO or some shit. They're like one literally is called Gupta.
Yes.
Yeah, like I'm gonna blame it on them anyway. Fuck it. Whatever, dude. I was fucking going out and being like, yeah, like what place is actually gonna be able to take our fucking money?
Yeah, well, look, so the guy who's head of products at CrowdStrike, his name is Rajmani. And, man, he fucking looks like Dinesh D'Souza as well. And then the guy who's head of engineering is Karan Gupta. I think that was the one you were thinking of. So, yeah, I was thinking maybe I should have recorded a small bit with Khyber, because he obviously knows all about this stuff. But sorry, I didn't even introduce this properly. This was basically the software outage, or the IT issues that occurred on Friday afternoon and continued into much of the weekend. It affected airports, banks, supermarkets, just
hospitals,
businesses all over the entire world. Yeah, people unable to do money transfers and all sorts.
I'm not a like a subject expert, but I do have like a base understanding of what this was. CrowdStrike is basically an anti-malware / like anti like code injection software that a lot of a lot of internet-based things run as like a face or like a pretext before any information is entered into their website, just to make sure nothing nasty is being injected. So when an update was pushed, and basically an automatic update was pushed, and it had a null pointer coding error in it, basically a null pointer. It's really fucking simple. Should have been picked up. It's one of like the first fucking things you learn as like a coding error in C++. It just shouldn't have fucking happened. There were so many levels of incompetence, so many barriers of incompetence that needed to have been passed for this to happen in the first place. And obviously because, there was, no... For the stuff that did remain online, there was no malware protection. For the stuff that didn't remain online, well, it didn't remain online and it was rendered to be completely fucking useless. Either which way, both financial and software damage done.
Right. Khyber was telling me it's also like he said it's a cardinal sin to run a software update on a Friday.
Yeah.
Because then, you run into the weekend and it causes all sorts of issues. So I'd imagine some heads are going to roll there. Yeah, thankfully I wasn't affected by it, but I know it was just causing fucking havoc everywhere else.
Yep.
So I think most of the issues have been resolved, although Claire O'Neill, who is the Home Affairs Minister, did say that there was still going to be some teething issues for the next week or two. So not everything has been totally fixed. But Albo also said that there's been no impact to critical infrastructure, government services, or 000 services. I don't know if that's true. Because I heard that emergency services were affected in other countries, Maybe just not here in
Well, it was
Australia.
global. It was fucking global.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it doesn't look like we actually, emergency services were not affected in Australia, as far as I can see. But yeah, it's oh yeah, something else Kyber did mention was the fact that this also has to do with cloud systems, and like
Yeah.
all it takes is just like one one fuck up like that, and everyone who's connected to
Everything
that
shits
cloud
the
system,
bed.
yeah,
But no, it was like one of the things was saying, like, even talking about it fucking day of was like, yeah, like, I'm not one of these massive conspirators, but I'm still a big, like, non-proponent of digital fucking currency. Just because, yeah, one, it gives states and institutions the ability to shut you out of a functional life for whatever fucking reason. But also, like, the level of fragility it has is astonishing.
right, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I can't imagine Bitcoin ever becoming, like the currency. I mean, even in places where it's been
Oh, fuck no.
legalized, like the idea that that would replace fiat as like the national currency just wouldn't work.
Yeah, fuck no. A digital currency would have to be one much less volatile. No, Bitcoin is an investment asset. It's nothing more. Um,
Yeah.
even fucking was it Milton Friedman basically said, like, as soon as you have like something that isn't directly currency in a system, or as soon as you have a system with two currencies in it, one of them will become an investment ad, and the other one will be actually used.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that, but yeah, libertarians are all kind of split on that. Like, uh, Milton Friedman was a Chicago school libertarian, and they tend to be, you know, they didn't like the idea of a gold standard and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the Austrian libertarians, they were for a gold standard competing currencies, so they love cryptocurrency, and a lot of them, have made the prediction that Bitcoin will become just like the standard currency. It won't.
No.
Um,
Yeah, no. Libertarians always, temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
okay, now just one other thing on cybersecurity. Uh, we know that, ironically, the company MediSecure was hacked a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that a lot of customer data was compromised. We've got a figure on that now. It's actually around 12.9 million Australians who would have had their data accessed or stolen via that hack on MediSecure. So I just find it so funny that that's their name, MediSecure, and they had the data of 12.9 million people stolen.
Can we get them for false advertising?
I doubt it. Okay. I guess this sort of gives us an excuse to talk about the assassination attempt on Trump. But, when that was really blowing up in the headlines, it didn't take long for people to say, well, is something like that possible in Australia? Could we have an attempt on a politician's life here? Um,
Yeah.
the answer would be, well, yeah, I'd say so. I mean, politicians still do have security details. There was that Hilton bombing in 1978. That was in South Australia. But I think that's really the only one we've ever had. Um, now, when we're talking about the safety of politicians, and we want to compare that to what's actually happening in Australia, well, you'd have to look at the recent vandalizations of offices that have been almost
Mm.
exclusively of the Labor Party, not of anyone else.
Yes. And over what issue?
Yeah. So I'd be willing to say that if an Australian politician is killed or someone attempts to kill them, I would say it would have to be over an issue that is basically external to Australian domestic interests. In other words, it has to be something that really animates someone, and that would be something like the Israel-Palestine conflict. I mean, think about it. That's the main reason why you go and try to kill political leaders. I mean, the IRA tried to kill Margaret Thatcher, for example, and what was that over? It wasn't over inflation or something. It was
No.
over territory in Northern Ireland, plain and simple. That is actually
Is it like boys with the girls with the time machine? It's like, I'm your granddaughter. Well, really, it's boys with the time machine. It's a dude talking to an IRA guy. It's like, use 3 times the explosives. You don't get the bitch.
Yeah, because they did actually. I think they took out a minister. They did kill someone. Yeah, when they went after her, they nearly got her.
Really?
That was an incident that was over ethnicity and identity and a fight for territory. That is what people get most animated over. That's what people are willing to die over and to kill over. Up until now in Australia, we don't really have issues like that. We don't have like a Tasmanian separatist movement or something. We just don't have that.
Be a lot cooler if we did.
Maybe, but and this is hilarious. Why, like most Australians, they can't name our first prime minister because Australia's history is peaceful. We didn't fight like a big revolution or anything like that. We didn't fight off the British or anything. In fact, we voted no in the referendum. So we don't have those issues. But now that we have a massive diaspora populations, various populations, we're at a stage now where it could be possible that a politician or some political figure is assassinated, or someone tries to assassinate them because of, say, their stance on Gaza, or definitely something that could happen in future. What about their stance on an independent Sikh state within India? That is something that is animating a shitload of Indians.
Yeah, we've had them fucking beat each other in the streets with fucking cricket bats. We've actually had 2 stabbings as well, because just to remind you guys that Sikhs carry around weapons religiously. Yeah, no, it's that is completely and utterly viable. God, I love foreign
the Indian
political
government did
violence.
Take out. They deny it, of course, but they took out like a separatist in Canada, and it's pretty obvious that we at least have some Indian spies operating in Australia and keeping tabs on people who are affiliated with Khalistan. I think it's what they call it, isn't it? They want their own independent Khalistan carved out of India.
Yep.
So yeah. I forgot to say, Mike Pizzullo, our best friend. He's the former head of Home Affairs. He's called for a review into the security arrangements of politicians. He specifically said at the federal level, though, which is, fair enough. I mean, very rarely do officers of state members go after, unless you count that the botched conservative terrorism, that happened a few weeks ago. That guy who went after the state Labor MP, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name. He actually walked into the office.
We covered it. That was so fucking weird, man. It's like, I am going to show it with is a hammer and a knife? Wear full tactical gear and show it with a hammer and a knife. Oh, and a saw, yes.
Yeah, and he had a camera on his helmet as well, so he could film it.
Was he filming a weird snuff video?
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah. Okay. That would be the only other case when you just get some like mentally deranged person who wants to go kill a politician, and that guy chose like one of the most low-profile politicians in the country to go after. No idea why. So yeah, that's underway. But look, You know what always happens though? Whenever they talk about security details, they're not just going to be talking about the security details of politicians. They're going to talk about the security details of the Jewish population, just generally. Okay, because that's what they always do. They hand out these fucking security grants, and people might remember a couple of months ago we did an episode on the social cohesion funding that the government was doling out. The Muslim community had received round about $2 million. Do you know how much the
Oh
ECAJ
yeah.
got? They got $25 million. So
Yes.
yeah,
And
just
now,
always
and
remember
it's
when they
not just
talk about the.
it wasn't just the fucking money, because when it comes to these fucking people, it's never just about the fucking money. What position did they get? They got a fucking commissar, a government. Literally, the ECAJ's ex fucking leader.
Oh, you mean the
Ah,
envoy, the
yeah, the envoy.
the anti-Semitism czar, essentially. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and they got one before. There's going to be one on Islamophobia as well. But yeah, I mean, they were quick. It was only because of the Jewish community that they did that, and the Islamophobia envoy is just there because of tokenism, not to upset the Muslims too much. But yeah, security detail. If they're going to increase that on politicians, they are absolutely going to increase the funding for the Jewish community as well. It goes part and parcel. Um, yeah, with political threats and violence in this country. Okay, now just last story on national security. Talking about the Home Affairs Minister again, Claire O'Neill. Um, she did a speech the day after Donald Trump had the assassination attempt on him, and
Mm.
she said that democracy in the West is under consistent threat. So I'll read what she said here. Many democratic countries are becoming less democratic. Like a virus, populists are replicating at an exponential rate. New strains of nationalism are emerging around the world. They are personalizing political power, strangling free speech, attacking diversity, and adopting strongman authoritarian measures, all in the name of saving the soul of the nation. It seems like the democratic project is backsliding, not only in newer but less robust democracies, but also in democracy's heartlands. Now, look, dare I say, what she's doing there is attacking the so called populist right. She's going after figures like Trump, Marine Le Pen, uh, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. She's pretty much going after all of them and calling them a bunch of racists because they're apparently going after diversity. They're attacking
Mm.
diversity. What they don't seem to realize is diversity itself is undermining the democratic project because rather than having an overall majority that agrees on a certain direction for a country to take, you get lots of competing minorities at each other's throats instead. And that is actually what threatens democracy because you have so many stakeholders with opposing interests that no one can agree on anything. Um, and I mean, Jesus, just look at the Muslim vote. Uh,
There we go.
the fact that in the next election, like what I'm leaning towards in terms of the results for the next election is I think I agree actually with what Peter Dutton said, which is that Labor will win, however, they won't win enough for an overall majority. That means they'll have to go into an alliance with Teals, Muslims, and the Greens. All right. Um, I'm not sure yet if the Muslim vote will be completely successful. I've got
Yeah,
a
we'll
story on that
see.
later.
Yeah,
But
we'll
let's
see
just
about that.
say, yeah. But the way, like, if you just want to look at the polls alone, those Muslim vote candidates would definitely fucking get votes. Right now, it's just an organizational question. Are they going to get the money and the campaigning together well enough to actually make that happen? But if you simply look at the polls and you look at what voters want. They're competing interests. And you're going to end up in a mess of a coalition government where all these factions don't agree, and you're going to end up with a stalemate for many bills not being able to pass the House of Reps in the first place. Now, that is what I'd call an attack on democracy, Claire O'Neill. So when we're attacking diversity, we're actually attacking one of those impediments to the democratic will of the people. And that is, you're reducing the overall majority and you're replacing it with competing minorities. And when that happens, you end up with, I guess, what you could call a soft or a cold civil war. You know, we're not actually, say, in a hot civil war where we take up arms against each other, like in Yugoslavia. But instead, we're constantly vying for political power and resources within our own countries.
We're in a slow shitabolic collapse.
Yeah, I mean, America has been in a state of cold civil war for a long time, you know, and Australia is finally catching up.
All right. Well, it's because America did it hard and fast, and it started in the '60s in America. Well, you could say with the Negro, it started earlier than the '60s, but like functionally, it started in the '60s. Over here, like the White Australia policy only ended in the fucking early '70s. And up until that point, the racial stock of this country had been, for the vast majority, literally just Anglos and Celts.
Yeah.
They had a big head start on us, I'll put it that way.
Okay. So let's move on to the Israel-Gaza conflict. Actually, not a lot to report here. Some of the protests have just sort of wound down. I think they're kind of going for monthly protests now instead of weekly. I think it's been like that in WA for a while, though. But in Sydney and Melbourne, they're kind of, you know, it's fizzling out a little bit. Even though they're still doing big stunts, like, you know, climbing on top of Parliament House and that kind of thing. But the ABC profiled this doctor. What's her name? Dr. Bushra Othman. Some woman. So she was with the Palestinian Australian New Zealand Medical Association, PANSMA. Never heard of them before. But she was one of the volunteers.
They're a recent NGO that popped up around about January this year.
Oh, so they're a new one. Okay.
Yeah. Dude, their fucking stories were harrowing. They actually were going to put them on SBS into the things, but then they literally apologized, saying like, "Hey, look, we're not putting this on the fucking short segment."
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, like she's got some horrific stories here. So, yeah, like she just returned to Australia. I think she's going to go back though. But she said that she felt a sense of duty to go over there. And let's see, what are some of the stuff she said? She had to perform abdominal surgery on children in the dark. She said that sometimes she would work up to 20 hours in one shift. They were treating patients on mattresses in hallways, so with no privacy at all for the patients. Of course, she had a lot of patients die on her, many of whom were children. She said medical staff did all they could to treat burst abdomens caused by poor post-surgery care and were hampered by an overall lack of medical supplies, and said that morphine was almost non-existent there. And yeah, I mean, when Israel is literally blowing up your hospitals, these descriptions that she's giving doesn't surprise me in the least. Okay. So we have some polling out here. This was done by Roy Morgan. And this was looking at attitudes on the Israel-Gaza conflict. So people aged 18 to 30 were more likely to believe the Australian government favours Israel and more likely to want greater action by Australia to support Palestinians. Right. So I think that's one of the reasons why the offices of Labor MPs are being targeted so much. Number one, they're the ones in government, and number two, they're still on Israel's side. Okay, even if you do get, little token pieces of rhetoric from Penny Wong and the like, we're still buying Israeli technology, for example. The Australian government simply only supports a hypothetical future two-state solution. They voted against that motion in the parliament. And so people are still angry with the Labor Party. It's also found fewer than 2 out of 5 young voters gave their primary vote to Labor in 2022. And it looks like that trend could worsen over time. So a recent report, I think we went over this one at the time, for Centre of Independent Studies, called Generation Left. This is what they call the report. They found that Gen Z are more progressive than previous generations and aren't becoming more conservative as they age. So that means a fall in the support of the Labor Party among young people is not because they're going and voting Liberal or National. It's because they're voting for populist left parties like the Greens, or if you can call them that. But they're voting for, parties or independents to the left of Labor. And certainly in the case of Muslim voters, they're just voting for anyone who has more of a pro-Palestinian stance. What I'd really like them to do is analyze young conservative voters, like young voters, like say 18 to 30, who vote for the Liberal Party or the National Party, and get what they think on Israel and Gaza. Because, just anecdotally, you can tell that they're shifting as well. They're not as gung-ho on the whole pro-Israel stuff as boomers and, say, the type of X's that you see on Sky News. They're not very keen on it.
No. I don't think anyone is, dude. There's been so much fucking ghoulish shit. And even at the fucking pro ones, outside of, say, like, diehard boomer conservatives, few of them there are, it's just Jews.
Yeah.
Yes, it is just from a distance.
I was letting the cat out. I'm sorry.
That little fucking demon creature.
I try to do these things seamlessly, Knowles, and you call me out on them every time.
Immediately on side. Yeah. No, like literally, like that's the reason why, kind of like the psyops that we see with the Palestinian movement, the ones that we were kind of watching from afar ourselves. We're just like, oh yeah, how do we tie this into being gay and being Aboriginal? And if you go look at a modern day Palestinian protest, outside of the direct action some Arabs are taking, for example, with these officers, it's literally just like, here's how many fucking Aboriginals I can fit up my fucking twink ass.
Yeah, and look, right, definitely it is Jews, but it's Jews from across the political spectrum, as we'll get an example of in this next story. But yeah, I would just basically say that, it's it's also who are the Jews able to fool the most? And that is definitely right-wing Christians,
Yeah.
The whole concept of Christian Zionism doesn't really make sense. But they were the ones who were most kind of captivated by it, first with the whole moral majority movement in America, and then that just sort of spread over to Australia. But yeah, they're the goyim though who you see on Sky News. Obviously you've got Shari Markson. She's probably the most high-profile newsreader they have at Sky News, who's Jewish. But all the rest are goys,
Yep.
People like Paul Murray and all that. They're all goys. But but it's the people who are, younger than them, like the millennials and the Gen Z conservative types, or at least Liberal Party voters. They're not being as fooled as easily, I don't think. Even when they watch Sky News, they just kind of think, I don't understand all of this gung-ho support for Israel. And surely it can't be just the fact that they're, apparently the only liberal democracy in the Middle East. It has to be something more than that. Anyway, so
I'd say this, like the only reason why Christian Zionism exists is kind of to fake its own name or to falsify its own name. It's nothing religious. It's just the desire of these kind of like conservative types to live vicariously through Jews in a state that obliterates Muslims, is religious, and nominally is nationalistic, ethno-nationalistic, and right-leaning. Well, not right-leaning. Jesus fucking Christ. They've got radical exterminists in the fucking party. This is further right than I would even tolerate.
Well, look, the Australian is also trying to tell us that, they're running this campaign to basically paint the Greens as an anti-Semitic party. And they've given this example here of a Jewish guy named Daniel Coleman, who is American originally, but he's been part of the Green movement for decades.
Mm.
And he said that he's been a member of the Australian Greens for over 10 years. And he said that he's just torn up his membership. He said that the Greens' anti-racism mantra does not extend to protecting Jewish people. So he said the Jewish Green supporters,
which it was,
have been left exhausted after pushing back against extreme elements. And he said that his membership in the party was untenable when he realized anti-racism values seemingly didn't extend to anti-Semitism after October 7. Okay, fine. But remember that by-election, the Greens ran a Jewish candidate as well. So, no, I mean, look, I would maybe say, some of the Muslim voters within the Greens, maybe they think that way. And, the only reason they're a member of the Greens party is because they see them as the only viable party going for Palestinian rights. That's it. So they're people I'd say are not really true Greens in a way. But as for the rest of the party, no, look, they look at Israelis as basically just a bunch of white people in the Middle East who stole land.
Yeah, they see it as European colonialism. And unfortunately, an old friend of ours also fucking occasionally calls it European colonialism and tells the Jews to go back to Poland.
What, is that Syrian girl?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. She believes in the Khazar theory or whatever the fuck, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about one of those Greens who is said to be anti-Semitic. That is Mehreen Faruqi. So, she had a recent appearance on Insiders where she repeatedly refused to, condemn Hamas. And, Adam Bandy...
That anti-Semitism comes with a side of naan bread.
Yeah, and look, but the reason why I'm willing to say that maybe she does hold some anti-Semitic feelings is because she's actually a Pakistani Muslim. And, like I said, her affiliation with the Greens may well simply be because of the pro-Palestine stance. And they're really the only party, at least at the federal level, that is vocal about it. So anyway, as kind of a response to this, Bill Leak's son, I'm sorry, I forget it. Joanna's, is that how you say that? I don't know how to say his first name. But it's Bill Leak's son.
Like it.
He basically, he took off where his father left off, and he does political cartoons now. So I think this one appeared in the Australian. I'm not sure. It's got a picture of a wall that has October 7 written on it. And then it's got a picture of Mehreen Faruqi with some paint. And she's like rolling white paint over the top of it to obscure what it says, October 7. And then it's got a speech bubble from her that says, "What's the big deal? It's just a bit of paint." So the idea is that she's whitewashing October 7. This is what pro-Palestinian activists are always accused of. They want to pretend that October 7 never happened. So that was the implication. I didn't even think that was particularly clever or funny either. It was just kind of, kind of lame.
There's way better. Like, you got a woman with a goofy ass name like fucking Mehreen Faruqi. You got like, all this kind of stuff. You got a lot of material here, and that's a really disappointing outcome. You could have like fucking put October 7 on a on a dildo and illustrators like fucking making that thing disappear right up her ass. And at least you would have got a chuckle out of me.
Yeah, I mean, even his dad, I didn't even think his dad was that good. He was the one who drew that one where the Aboriginal kid was being brought back home by a police officer, and he said, like, "You're going to have to show your son some respect for the law," or something. And then the dad says, "Okay, what's his name then?" And that was it. I was like, kind of lame, man. But that was called horrifically racist. Even though all three figures, even the cop in that cartoon, were depicted as Aboriginal. But in this case of Mehreen Faruqi whitewashing October 7, she said that cartoon is racist and it has the power to cost her votes at the next election. And she has actually threatened a defamation suit against Leak Jr. here. Now, he has basically doubled down, and I think he actually wrote like an opinion piece on it. And he more or less said, "Yeah, I dare you. Like, go on, do it." And to which I'd say, like, be careful what you wish for, because even though I think it would be absolute bullshit to, take out a defamation case over something like that, I think it would be awful if you were to lose. However, don't doubt them on this. We know that very often these defamation cases are successful, and you end up having to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars, like the money David Lionhelm had to fork out to Sarah Hanson Young. I think he had to fork out $200,000. It can be a fair bill, pretty hefty bill. But so far, hasn't happened. And remember, there's already one case going on with Mehreen Faruqi, and that's against Pauline Hanson for apparently defamatory tweets saying "piss off back to Pakistan." So,
and the only question is, why don't you?
Yeah, it is. Okay, now let's talk about the Muslim vote. I love reading stories about these guys. This one was I found particularly amusing. So I mentioned before that a future hung parliament could mean relying on the votes of Muslim independents. Certainly, if they had the organizational power and they did a good campaign and they got decent candidates to go out there and shake as many hands as possible and everything, that would definitely translate into a couple of seats in the lower house. I think it would anyway. The issue, of course, is can they actually get that ball rolling? Are they able to get enough money behind it and get a stable enough campaign with the right candidates and, not have them at each other's throats and everything and actually running a smooth campaign? Well, they've already run into stumbling blocks. So they're saying that the division is already, in a way, imploding because there's so many divisions within them. Because, think about it, they're really actually just one group that's been brought together. There are many groups brought together over one issue, and that is Palestine. It's obviously what's going on in Gaza right now is really, really animating people, and it's animated
And
all.
honestly, like how many divisions you like? Say, like, what's our most populous fucking Muslim group? It's Sunni, isn't it? Because that's like the most populous worldwide, right?
Yeah, they're mainly Sunnis.
Yeah. Yeah, just look at the fucking Sunnis. Say like it was a purely political group of Sunnis. Moderate Sunnis, like fucking literally like they have their own version of fucking Seventh-day Adventists. Ones who actually do follow the prayer cycle, ones who don't follow the prayer cycle. Like literally like ones from say like the north of India versus ones from Arabia versus ones from East Africa. There's a massive set of fucking divisions even within that large fucking group. And
Yeah.
Shia, pro-Iran or anti-Iran? I've talked to both.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, there's even like the Sunni Shia divide within Islam and all of that.
Yeah, not even
And
fucking bracing for that.
right. And say Muslims from, even like say Shia from Iraq may have some big problems with Shia from Iran. They definitely have their own ethnic
Deadly
divide.
fucking problems.
Yes. So that is one of the issues that they have at the moment. So people who spoke to, they've just referred to them as community leaders here who spoke to the Australian over this. They said that while these candidates are passionate, they may have bitten off more than they can chew and are politically naive. And this, of course, is where Labor has the advantage over them. Okay, even if these Muslim vote candidates do well in the polls and everything like that, they're up against a very well-oiled Labor machine who definitely do have the funding and do have the slick campaigning and the spin doctors and everything else to run a successful campaign. These people simply don't. And, they don't have all that much time to organise either, considering the election's probably going to be in, April or May next year. So, they'd want to get a move on in that regard. But the other funny thing here is the Greens. The Greens have basically said to this, this Muslim vote, we want you to do two things for us. One, can you please not run anyone in the Senate? And can you not run anyone in the seat of wills? They basically want them to focus exclusively on Western Sydney and go after those Labor MPs who are in safe Labor seats. Because it seems now that they're really weighing up all their options. They're saying, no, we can look beyond this. We can maybe get a senator or two in the Senate. And on top of that, they are very reluctant to actually endorse the Greens candidate. So even if, say, I don't know, they decide not to run someone in the seat of wills, that doesn't mean that they would then go, okay, we officially endorse this Greens candidate because they are good on Palestine. Now, what is the reason for that? Well, the Greens party, I'm just quoting from the Australian here, their positions on same-sex issues, religious schools, and drug reform were a deal breaker with campaign figures, regardless of the shared Palestinian stance. All right, this is something we've been saying about the Greens for a long time. Muslims will only vote for them for the Palestine issue, but on just about everything else, they're opposed to the Greens. So now they're being given a real choice. They're like, hold on, we'll actually give you a Muslim candidate who is against same-sex marriage, who is for religious freedom in school, who is against decriminalization of drugs, etc. So you can have your cake and eat it too. But that's what's happening.
I love how
And
fucking retarded our politics is getting because of the mix of like ethnic interests and like general societal collapse. I love all this shit. This is great.
Yeah, but I mean, can you see how that is making the Greens shit the bed?
Yep.
Like, hold on. They're not just threatening Labor, they're threatening us now. All those Muslim votes that we used to get before, we can't take them for granted anymore. And, like a future incarnation of the Greens, I don't think would have someone like Mehreen Faruqi in them. because she would then have the opportunity to sit with another voting bloc or even just another party that represented Australian Muslims. Why the hell would she need to sit with the Greens then at that point? She wouldn't.
I think it's so funny,
That's
like,
the
you
only
know, the
reason why
Greens
you
have
have a
spent so
Muslim,
long
like,
demonizing Christians when they're the
the
only
only
one of
reason
the
you
only
have
fucking
a brown
religions in this
Muslim in the
country that
parliament,
tolerates bags.
the only reason why you have a brown Muslim in the parliament sitting with the Greens and voting in favour of things like gay marriage is because she has no other political home to go to. She has nowhere else to go. The Muslim vote would give her somewhere to go, as it would many of these other people who reluctantly, begrudgingly vote Green just because of the pro-Palestine stuff. Okay.
Oh, dude, I mean, is there enough gays and hippies to keep the Greens afloat, or are they all going to be sucked up into the rectal void that is the new Islamic Party?
Well, we're not importing them. To the extent that the vote for the Greens increases, that's to do with the increased urbanisation of Australia. You know, that is sort of city slickers who become more and more disconnected from the outside world and only have first world problems to think about. But that is not a population that we import. You know, that's just a population that we kind of create. Overwhelmingly, we are importing people who would not vote for the Greens, or at least would not agree with their entire platform. Okay.
Yeah.
Last story on Israel Gaza. Lydia Thorpe took a selfie of herself, uploaded it to social media, and it was her wearing like
that's a crime.
A green bandana.
Oh,
and
no.
It had Arabic written on it. So this made everyone think that she was wearing like the Hamas flag on her head. Actually, if you translate the Arabic that's written on it, it said, "I love chocolate milk." So I guess you were all trolled.
Oh yeah, one of those old gags where it's just like it's a bag and it's got Arabic on it and it's kind of like done up with the tassels and the gold lining to look like an ISIS battle flag or an Islamic battle flag. Yeah. And then the actual Arabic reads is like, oh, like, you know, people who are ignorant, you know, don't fucking like, you know what this actually says this. And it's just like, yeah, because no one wants to learn your dog shit language.
No one wants to learn to read from right to left. All right.
Goddamn fucking Japanese.
All right, so look, just one quick story on immigration. That is, the Nauru detention centre is almost full now. And believe it or not, a little over 6 months ago, Nauru was empty. There wasn't a single detainee in offshore detention on Nauru. In the last 6 months, it has grown sixfold, and they're pretty much at full capacity now. So this has obviously drawn the ire of the coalition. They're attacking Labor for abandoning Operation Sovereign Borders, which of course was brought in by Tony Abbott. But Claire O'Neill has pointed out that the funding from Sovereign Borders has never been cut. However, apparently there is a drop in the amount of air and sea patrols. So I don't know if they're just spending that other money on bloody diversity programs or whatever. But it wouldn't surprise me. But look, like I always say, I'm not really bothered by this. You're talking about like really a few hundred people who come in each year illegally via boat. And that's it. It's an absolute drop in the ocean.
It is a problem. It's not the problem.
Yeah. It's a very small problem, is what I'll say. And I hate how, when it comes to immigration, that seems to be the only thing that the coalition talks about. And unfortunately, it fools a lot of people into thinking that they have a hardline stance on immigration. No, they just have a hardline stance on sovereign borders. That's it. You know, and it doesn't make much of a difference. Okay. Moving on to climate and energy. And here we get to talk about a minority government again, should that eventuate. So if it's a Labor minority government, of course, you would expect to see an alliance with the Greens. Adam Bandt is saying that should that happen, the Greens would demand new legislation that would restrict gas export contracts. So that would mean that the major gas companies would have to divert supply to the domestic market, to the Australian market. So that includes for both manufacturers and for households. And yeah, prioritize those ahead of international buyers. What else? Oh yeah, so Adam Bandt also revealed he would back a much bigger role for publicly owned renewable energy in generation and in sale to businesses and households. Now, this is all because, well, the Greens need some way to fuel these targets that they have. So they support 75% emissions reduction target by 2030. And a platform to reach net zero by 2035. Remember, even the Coalition and Labor say, their target is net zero by 2050. The Greens want that 15 years in advance.
Jesus fucking Christ.
So, I don't know. When I see stuff like this, I guess that is the one thing that makes me think, maybe a coalition government would be preferable than a Labor government, or certainly a Labor Greens alliance.
This is also fucking painful. Oh yes, okay. Yes. The concession that a coalition government would be great. It's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna get a blue flavored fucking sodomy with an extra 15 years on the ticket. Okay, all right.
Yeah, but you might get nuclear power. You might get nuclear power.
You're relying on a conservative not to fuck up something that's an easy basketball win. The easiest hoop fucking swish. Come on, man.
All right, so on to the next story. Fortescue Metals, where you've got that champion for green energy at the top, Andrew Forrest. So Fortescue, lately, they reckon they've racked up about $2.1 billion in losses over the past 4 years regarding their green energy arm. They're also sacking, they're 700 jobs are being cut now as well.
What was I telling you about 3.5 years ago?
Now,
I don't even think I was a co-host then.
Oh, maybe not. So anyway, despite this, like the green arm of Fortescue Metals is clearly failing. Andrew Forrest is saying that Labor should still push ahead with the billions of dollars of tax incentives for green hydrogen producers, even though he has scaled down his own green hydrogen ambitions, which is part of why he's sacking 700 people. So he said the feasibility of the industry came down to the cost of electricity, a position that's backed by the scientist Alan Finkel, and Fortescue's decision to pull back from its target of producing 15 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. That should not force a government rethink of its current strategy. So basically what he's doing is he's like pulling Fortescue out to a large extent, pulling them out of green hydrogen. But he's saying that, Labor should still go ahead and offer all these tax incentives for other companies to get into green hydrogen, even though by
sounds a bit hypocritical.
It's not working for Fortescue.
Well, again, what is green hydrogen?
Losses.
what is green hydrogen? Green hydrogen is pumping electricity in a remote fucking area, so the electricity is more expensive by base, into a fucking electrolytic cell so it can split water, which has to be fucking like, it has to be purified, it has to be distilled water, can't be just straight up seawater because that creates chlorine gas, not hydrogen gas. And then when you actually use that hydrogen for its end product, because it's a combustion cycle thing or a combustion, well, it's fuel, right? Thermodynamically, it can only be about a top of about like 35% efficient. So you're only getting out about 35% of the fucking electricity you put into it in the first goddamn place.
Right. And obviously Twiggy himself doesn't think it is that viable if he's scaling it back.
Yeah, you know, the other department for hydrogen for Fortescue Metal Group, which is also why they still want, like, you know, the tax cuts and etc. For the at least the hydrogen industry, is because there is one that is viable, which is where you use superheated steam to break down LNG into like hydrogen and then lower alkene gases. That's called blue hydrogen. That is also a part of their hydrogen project, and it's the only one that's going forward today.
Right.
Yep, that's how it works.
All right. So only 3 stories on climate today. The next one we have is in New South Wales. So the New South Wales Forestry Products Association has accused the Labor government of carbon colonialism. So they say a new method of greenhouse gas emissions reductions produced to the federal government would actually result in a higher global emissions. Okay. What this is mainly about is giving people carbon credits for not clearing land. We know this is one of the ways they give them out. So, you know, if you're a farmer or something and you've maybe got some forestry on your land and you don't get rid of it, well, you're issued a carbon credit, and you can sell that for money, or you can use it to emit a certain amount of carbon emissions, whatever it might be. But anyway, this state project is looking to place around 176,000 hectares of state forest and make it a national park. In other words, you can't log it. This is protected forest and you can't chop it down. So it's not a big wonder that the Forestry Products Association is not happy about that. Yeah, I mean, look, basic law of supply and demand, wouldn't that have to mean that if there's a demand for timber, you've got to supply it, meaning you've got to grow it?
Yeah. Yes.
And, I'm going to sound very libertarian here. I remember seeing this on Penn and Teller. Remember Penn and Teller's bullshit?
Penn and Teller should stay in Vegas and possibly be eaten by one of the loose tigers that are also in Vegas, and stop being gay.
There was some stuff I agreed with them on, but I remember they made a claim in that episode that basically there hasn't, like, the amount of forestry that we have in the world right now is more than we've ever had, and one of the reasons for that is a demand for timber. Because companies are aware that, if you chop it down and you don't replant it, well, you're going to run out eventually. So they do have an economic incentive to actually grow it.
Yeah, to a degree. Like, I guess forest farms are a thing, but forest farms are only so many square meters because they're cycled over every 4 to 5 years, depending on the species of. I can hear that little shit, by the way. We have less. I mean, you can look at satellite maps and etc. You can you can even look at like the International Space Station's fucking Korea photos as it like goes over the Earth, and it's less and less green year on year. The thing is that, like, tree farms, they're denser, they have a higher turnover rate than like actual forests and etc. And because of their lack of biodiversity, and biodiversity just means like, parts of an ecosystem that support each other, not like fucking importing, invasive species. Because of that, they basically they don't hold birds, they don't hold fucking like small shrub growth, they don't hold like fucking things that live in there. And they're packed so dense the soil's too tough for anything that wants to build a warren to survive there either. Yeah, we probably have more trees per head, but we don't have a better ecology because of tree farming.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I might be wrong there, but who knows?
It's again, go out to the hills, see old growth forests, and then go to the pines, man. You'll see the difference immediately. In fact, your human body is so fucking weird, you'll feel the difference immediately.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, last time I really did that was when I was in Pemberton, which was a couple of years ago now. I haven't had that proper forest experience in a while. All right. So, onto the economy. Again, not much here for this topic. The Australian newspaper is actually doing this like series on the Greens, like trying to highlight some of their less known policies. I think we talked last week about Advance, which is that that kind of grassroots conservative movement, like the equivalent of Get Up, and they're spending $5 million on shining a light on the more kind of radical policies of the Greens. Well, the Australian are sort of doing that at the moment, and the story that they had here, I'm getting this from, was their stance on the Reserve Bank. So the Greens actually say that the government should legislate to override the decisions of the Reserve Bank. In other words, when they make the decision to lift interest rates by 0.25% or whatever, the government should actually be able to come in and say, no, you can't do that. You're keeping interest rates on hold. So that obviously would violate the independence of the Reserve Bank. You could even say would violate the entire purpose of the RBA. Like, what would you need the RBA for if you have the power to actually override its decisions? So, I guess the Australian is sort of pointing to that as one of those more radical elements that they propose. And I think I agree. I would not want to do that. I mean, that said, I think we'd be much better off if we had a state bank. We just had one national bank.
I've got one good counter argument against that, Finian.
What's that?
How do you like a hunting knife up your ass?
Well, we don't have much choice, do we? Obviously, the RBA is here to stay.
I was referencing Gaddafi. Just for the audience, just the people who Gaddafi got a hunting knife shoved up his ass, and one of his like core sins was
bayonet, wasn't it?
Sorry?
Wasn't it the end of a bayonet?
Large knife with a serrated edge on it.
Charming. Lovely.
That's what happens when you you try and keep the profits of your banking industry to the state. We just can't have that. Can't have that, big guy. Yeah. We're gonna like overfund a whole bunch of like miscontent fuck ups and shit bags that live on the edge of your country to raid your capital and assassinate you only after parading your bleeding body through the streets.
Yeah, well, the Australian also said that the government has no excuse to be running budget surpluses right now because there's a cost of living crisis. They said, of course, we would be open to budget surpluses in the future, only if the cost of living was under control. They also said they want the Productivity Commission to conduct a, quote, lock, stock and barrel review of the privatisation agenda over the past 50 years. Yeah, What good do government reviews ever do? Can't say I agree with that either. Okay, let's move on to crime. And we're just going to look at Queensland today, as we often do when it comes to crime. So they've got a report out on a new government program. It's been in place, I don't know, probably up to a year or so. And it revealed only 12% of young people did not reoffend in the 6 months after connecting with the scheme. Okay, so by any measure, that would sound like a failure. So what this is, I'll just explain what the program is first. It pairs a youth justice worker with a police officer on street patrols 24 hours a day to engage high-risk young people. So it's a youth justice worker and a cop.
Oh, one of them's going to die.
Walking around.
One of them's going to die, I guarantee you this. I'm putting money down right now. One of them is going to get stabbed to death. And then the fucking little feral's going to get shot.
Okay, well, here's something it found. Crimes by serious repeat offenders have reportedly dropped, pulling the average offending rate down 73% in the 6 months following the engagement with the co-responders. Now, what I must point out here, okay, fine, they've noticed like this little reduction that's gone on. Still, though, only 12% of people don't reoffend. Okay, that's a pretty high recidivism rate. But something that the ABC just completely misses here is, let's remember that Labor reintroduced the harsher laws that they had previously abolished. One was criminalizing skipping bail. Yes, that was actually not illegal for young people. If you're a juvenile delinquent and you skipped bail, you were not punished for it. And the other thing was detention as last resort. Labor introduced a policy saying that they are only to be given like a detention sentence, that is a jail sentence for a child, after all other avenues had been exhausted. Well, they abolished that too, remember? This sort of happened after a huge uptick in crime, but also, most notably, the 7-year-old woman who was stabbed to death. So, okay, you've seen an overall reduction in crime. Why is it that the ABC is saying that this program must have had something to do with it, which is just like a social worker who walks around with a cop? That's really all it is. All right. So in Queensland, again, just talking about the ALP, it doesn't look like the last budget that had some, pre-election sweeteners in it has done anything to improve Labor's prospects. So the latest statewide two-party preferred vote is 57% for the coalition and 43% for the LNP. That's a pretty massive margin. And remember, that budget had like $1,000 energy rebate and 50-cent public transport rides as well. But yeah, that has
very
not,
popular, I'd imagine. But
yep. So, if you were to have this is an overall swing of 10.2% against Labor, and if that were to apply to every seat in the Queensland election, you're talking electoral oblivion for Labor. So yeah, certainly my prediction for Queensland has not changed. David Crisafulli, even though he's a cuck and he's against nuclear power and stuff, he will be the next premier.
Oh, God.
Now, in Tasmania, again talking about the ALP, ex-Tasmanian MP Catherine Hay reportedly slapped her then husband and verbally abused him. So she's up on a charge of emotional abuse or intimidation and that's against Troy Richardson, who was her ex-husband, and she's pleaded not guilty to the charge. Now, as well as being a former MP of the Tasmanian Parliament, she's also former Miss Tasmania and Miss Australia.
Mm.
I looked her up before. There's some kind of
Did she look better back in the day?
She definitely did. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, she's an older woman now. Obviously, she's not going to look as good. But yeah, I mean, so I guess it just goes to show it can happen to men too. Men can be the victims of domestic violence too. All right.
I mean, to be fair, if you can't take a handful of slaps, that's okay. Like Jesus Christ.
The local Liverpool council in New South Wales. This is a council in southwestern Sydney. There's basically an intervention at the moment. Like, they're being taken over because of just rife mismanagement that's going on. So a report found allegations of a toxic culture within the council, including a gender bias and significant complaints leading to council staff being abused in public. And need I point out that this is one of the areas of Western Sydney with a lot of Muslims. So I wonder why there's a gender bias, as they put it here. Wouldn't have anything to do with that, would it? You've also got the usual allegations like misappropriation of funds, and also like an approval process that takes up to 222 days, when apparently the average approval process for other councils is only half that. So there's obviously some dodgy shit going on there. Okay, on defense, again, just one story. The war crimes, that was said to have been committed against 39 Afghan civilians, a compensation scheme is now up and running. So they're able to go and apply for that. I didn't read anything in here about giving them visas. I really hope it doesn't mean we give them visas. A lot of them end up over here anyway. And even John Howard,
even if it says explicitly that we don't, or like in etc., like how many fucking pathways these days is there to at least a working visa that just gets skipped and skipped and skipped and skipped?
Right. So yeah, I mean, like, even John Howard said that Australia had a moral obligation to accepting Afghan refugees because of our role in the war. It's like, no, Johnny, you put us in that fucking war, all right? If anyone's responsible for it, it's you. And you can fucking house them if you want. Classic neocon invade and invite bullshit.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So they can apply for that compensation fund now, and they have to be able to prove. It goes for the relatives too. So they have to be able to prove that they were either relatives of, this lot, or that they, and also that they're not associated with terrorists. So they can't be, associated with any kind of radical Islamic.
Oh, cool. You know what I'm going to do immediately? Lose my fucking passport. There we go. Problem solved.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a country that supposedly couldn't revoke the citizenship of Fatima Payman. So, they'd probably be pretty incompetent in other areas too. All right. On religious freedom, Michaelia Cash is saying that the draft legislation should be brought back into the fold again, and we should at least try and pass it before the next election. Remember, Labor have said that it's effectively dead now because they said that they're shelving it. They don't have any plans to look at it until after the election next year. And Michaelia Cash is saying that faith groups have provided a line-by-line feedback on the draft bill, and they expect something out of it. Well, one of the few times I agree with you, Ms. Cash, but I don't think Labor They just simply are not prioritizing this at the moment, and I don't think it's going to happen. All right. So how much do you think it cost to send Julian Assange from a British prison back to Australia? Apparently,
an inordinate amount of money.
it cost $781,480.
Damn.
Now, it turns out that most of that was that bill was footed by some organization. I forget what it was. The Wow Holland Foundation. It's spelled WAU. I don't know how to say that. However, Australian taxpayers actually paid 100 grand of that, and apparently the cost increased by 30%, so that Julian Assange could be flanked by Kevin Rudd and also Stephen Smith, both members of the
That
Labor
should be their
Party.
own fucking dime. That was a political stunt.
So yeah, the opposition, I think, quite rightly called this a very costly photo opportunity, and yeah, it's amazing. Like when you look at just you think all they're doing is playing for flights. I guess chartered flights are a lot of money. Okay, and finally, you can't see Tenacious D if you wanted to.
No.
I never found them funny to begin with. But you know what this was about? Very simply, it was...
New fag tried to destroy the Trump, but the Trump had its way.
So the, it's made up by Jack Black, and then you got the other guy who's not very famous, Kyle Gass. It was his birthday. Jack Black sang him happy birthday and then asked what his birthday wish was. And he said, next time, don't miss Trump. So he's obviously just referring to the assassination attempt. And just from that one unsavory joke, their whole Australian tour is off. So, I don't know, I guess I'm sort of siding with the left here, saying, why are the fun police or the thought police coming out saying that was bad enough to cancel an Australian tour? And yeah, I agree. It was like when that bad comedian, that redhead woman, like, she held up like a fake severed head of Trump. Remember, she got into heaps of shit over that.
Kathy, whatever the fuck her name is.
Yeah, I can't remember. She was on Seinfeld. But yeah, I guess I just kind of consider that to be a pretty harmless joke.
Yeah.
And yeah, the tour's off as a result.
Whatever.
All right, well, guys, this is the first time in a while we haven't given you an episode around about the 3-hour mark. So by our standards recently, it's actually a pretty short one because, yeah, not that much to do with Australian politics. Hopefully now that, Biden is out of the race and all of that, I subscribe to The Australian. It's called The Australian, and every time I fucking browse the headlines, it's all American news. So hopefully in the coming week, it won't be like that, and we have a little bit more coverage for you next time. But yeah, thank you for listening. As always, check us out at theracer.biz, and we'll see you soon.